Business news from the Capital Region. This is Washington Business Report with ABC7 national correspondent Rebecca Cooper.
Welcome to a fresh look at business and finance here in the Washington region. On the show today, forget politics. Washington is increasingly seen by the rest of the world as a great place to do business. But what makes different parts of our region stand out? Today, we're talking to Georgetown and Roslyn leaders about the best bids for doing business. Also, do you have a boss or a client that's difficult to work with? Even more importantly, how's your own impulse control? We'll teach you how to have a little emotional intelligence to get ahead. But first, the world and Wall Street continue to carefully watch the Crimean Peninsula. It's time for the Weekend Review. As tensions remain high throughout Ukraine, House Speaker John Boehner says it's time to allow U.S. companies to undercut Russian natural gas sales by exporting U.S. supply, accusing the White House of sitting on 24 applications from companies eager to take on one of Vladimir Putin's strongest commodities.
The president should do the right thing here and end this de facto ban so that we can strengthen our economy here and our security here and abroad.
But even with the tension overseas, the president did try to focus some attention on domestic issues this week, releasing his 2015 budget plan on Tuesday, and on Wednesday in Connecticut, again touting a hike in the minimum wage, insisting it's not that Americans resent when others do well.
Somebody goes out there, starts a business, invents a new product, provides a new service. That's what drives our economy. That's why this free market economy is the most dynamic on earth. We're thrilled with that. Everybody agrees on that. But what we also believe is that nobody who works full-time should ever have to raise a family in poverty.
And while the president pushed from Washington this week for more people to enroll in Obamacare, the First Lady was dispatched to Miami to remind Americans that March 31st deadline is fast approaching. On Friday, the monthly job numbers were released, with a sigh of relief for many investors. Despite harsh weather nationwide, February saw 175,000 new jobs created, even seeing a gain of 15,000 jobs in construction, normally a sector hardest hit by the bad weather. And joining us for the top business news, Politico managing editor Rachel Smolkin and former Pentagon spokesperson J.D. Gordon. Welcome to you both. J.D., let me start with you. You worked for both Secretary Rumsfeld and Secretary Gates. You've seen tension before. You know what it looks like. How concerned should the business community be about what's going on right now?
Well, I think the business community should be very concerned about what's going on in Ukraine right now because Vladimir Putin is really trying to reconstitute the Russian Empire. He said in 2005 that the greatest geopolitical tragedy of the 20th century was the dissolution of the Soviet Union.
But he doesn't seem hungry for a military confrontation. Do you think this could come to a military confrontation beyond just inside the Crimean region?
Yeah, it could be. I mean, look what happened in 2008 in Georgia. Basically, Vladimir Putin invaded, and he still has two provinces of Georgia right now. He has South Ossetia and Abkhazia. Right now, we see 16,000 Russian troops in Crimea surrounding all the Ukrainian bases. And if there is any more tension with Ukraine, I think you could see Russian troops in the eastern third of Ukraine as well. So I think the energy sector in particular has to be very focused on this.
And that's what I want to ask you about. We've been watching which stocks to watch, and we've been learning this week, sell airlines, of course, because they depend on gas prices, and that's been a big area of concern as we face these tensions. But buy potash. It's a fertilizer that Russia makes, and if there's economic sanctions, you're going to want to buy the Canadian potash stock. But rather than trying to figure out how to game the market, which isn't always the best way to approach world affairs, you do say there are some ways that the American government can approach the gas situation.
Absolutely. The White House could look for a win-win to help the U.S. business sector and to help Ukraine. And that's to approve these permits, these export licenses for liquid natural gas. Right now, there's a surplus in the United States due to hydraulic fracking. So we have a surplus of liquid natural gas. And the market forces say that if we could only have the Department of Energy approve these export licenses, it would help Ukraine as well.
Okay, so let's cut to the chase because you're called on for your expertise on this a lot. They've been saying that for a long time. What do you rate the chances of anything actually happening?
I'm not too optimistic because I've seen how this White House operates. It's big government, a lot of bureaucracy, but they need to help Ukraine and they need to help U.S. businesses. It's
so you're
going to
keep pushing.
I'm going to keep pushing.
You're not optimistic. Rachel, you've been watching all parts of the world and domestically this week, so I want to turn to you and look at first the job numbers on Friday. What's the White House saying in response to better than expected new jobs, but still slogging through the unemployment rate?
Well, there's an area where there is some optimism. This was a better than expected jobs report with 175,000 jobs added. And it looks like the economy, which there had been concerns about whether it was sputtering, or we're going to see another spring where the economy is again not rebounding, now seems to be inching along at least, and there are hopes that as the weather continues to improve, those job numbers will get even better and stronger. The White House has learned its lesson. They're cautious when these reports come out. They're not going to declare victory, not going to declare a full recovery, but we seem to be moving now in the right direction after 2 months where there was a lot of concern about the jobs reports.
Well, it was interesting. The last month's jobs report, the White House advisor said we don't attribute last month's jobs problems to the weather. We attribute it to Republicans in Congress. Janet Yellen did attribute last month's job numbers in part to the weather, but this was a surprising report. But bring it all full circle for us in terms of how all of this plays out politically for the midterms, because the president once again this week pushed a minimum wage hike. He knows that's not going to happen. House Republicans are never going to allow it. He also had to tread back into the waters of Obamacare because that March 31st deadline is still approaching, even with all the modifications they're making in Obamacare. What does it all mean?
Those are the three big issues of the midterm. We ticked through all of them this week. How is unemployment going to look? How is the economy going to be? Will it be stronger? What's going to be happening with Obamacare? Will the Republicans succeed in turning that into a major liability for the Democrats, as they certainly hope that they'll be able to do? And then pay equity or pay inequity, depending on how you look at it. The president presented his budget this week. We all know that's not going anywhere. The White House knows that's not going
even got
anywhere,
mention,
but well, I had to
Ukraine
compete this week with Ukraine. It was a real split screen experience, but it gives the White House a chance to push the Democrats' agenda, the minimum wage, the pay inequality for this year. That's going to be a big talking point for them and counter some of the Republican criticism.
Rachel, I want to give JD the last word on where we go from here with sanctions. You say Europe would be too hurt by sanctions. What do you rate the chances of moving forward on that front?
I think we have to keep working with the Europeans too, because they have a lot of trade. They have about $500 billion trade annually between the EU, the 28 member states, and Russia. The U.S. only has about $40 billion. And so we can do sanctions a lot easier than the Europeans. The last thing the Germans want is to be impacted by higher prices from Russia, because Russia is a bully when it comes to petrodiplomacy. They've cut off Belarus before. They've cut off Ukraine before. They're getting set to raise the prices tremendously to punish the new Kiev government. So we can help them with those liquid natural gas permits.
Although if we do sanctions and without Europe, I don't know how much real punitive effect it will have on Putin, although apparently it will affect Pepsi sales. I guess Pepsi has about 7% of sales in Russia, so we'll see on that front. JD Gordon, Rachel Smolkin, thanks so much for joining us on Washington Business Report. And coming up, what bids can do to improve your business? That's after the break.